Ethan had seen many wars, but nothing like the chaos that unfolded above the desert world of Sci-Fi. Alien ships carved glowing paths across the sky, exchanging blasts of energy that turned the clouds crimson. On the surface, soldiers from different worlds clashed in a cacophony of screams, explosions, and the scent of burning metal. Yet in the middle of it all, Ethan moved with a purpose that made him almost invisible to danger. He was a medic, trained to save lives even when the battlefield seemed impossible to survive. He ducked behind a broken transport ship as plasma fire whizzed past, then ran forward again when he saw a figure lying on the sand. It was Therion, the alien king. Ethan had only known the stories before, but now he could see the wounds. Deep gashes across his chest and arm, burns that had already started turning black. His alien physiology was impressive. He could survive longer than a human under trauma, but not long enough. Ethan had to act fast. Ignoring the chaos, Ethan pressed his medical kit to the king's wounds. He spoke softly, even though Therion might not understand, because speaking calmed his own shaking hands. "Hold on, just hold on," he muttered. The king's breathing was uneven, his massive chest heaving with pain. Ethan tore strips from his uniform to bandage him, then applied a pain serum that he hoped would work on alien biology. "Medic!" a voice shouted nearby. Ethan glanced up to see an enemy droid unit advancing, weapons locked on him. His heart pounded. He couldn't leave the king. Without thinking, he pulled a small energy grenade from his kit and threw it. The droid shattered into sparks, and Ethan turned back to Therion. Minutes stretched into hours. Ethan worked tirelessly, using both human medicine and improvised techniques to stabilize the king. Sweat dripped down his forehead, mixing with the dust and blood. Around him the battle raged, but he was in a bubble of focus. Finally, with one last bandage and a deep breath, he managed to stop the bleeding and stabilize Therion. The king's breathing slowed. He was alive. When the battle ended, Ethan was barely conscious himself. He had been pulled out by his team, but his eyes were constantly on Therion, making sure he remained safe. Word of his bravery spread quickly. Even the alien king's advisors, who had doubted humans, whispered about the fearless human medic who risked his life to save their ruler. Then there was Lyra. She was nothing like the dignified, elegant princesses humans imagined. She had sharp features, her skin marked with scars and blemishes, and her eyes carried a rebellious spark that made even the court uneasy. They whispered behind her back, calling her ugly and unworthy. But Ethan noticed her immediately. There was a fierceness in her gaze, a fire that was both intriguing and frightening. And she had a child with her, a small boy named Kale, who clung to her as if the world itself was dangerous. Lyra had been watching Ethan work, standing off to the side with arms crossed. She had never seen a human act like this, calm, precise yet fearless. He treated the king without fear of alien power, without bowing or begging. Lyra felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. It was respect, or maybe admiration, but she wasn't about to admit it. Instead, she rolled her eyes and muttered under her breath about the reckless human. When Therion finally opened his eyes, he saw Ethan for the first time. There was gratitude, yes, but also a new kind of recognition. This human had risked everything, not for power, not for honor, but for life itself. And in that moment, the king knew he owed this human more than words could express. He summoned Ethan to the palace. The halls were massive, filled with alien symbols and technology that Ethan could barely understand. But he walked in with steady steps, keeping his head high despite the awe he felt. Therion's voice, deep and commanding, filled the chamber. "You saved my life," the king said, "and for that you will be honored." Ethan blinked. He was used to thanks, medals, or simple words of appreciation. But what came next made him freeze. "You will be given Lyra and Kale." The words echoed in Ethan's mind. At first he thought it was a mistake, a translation error, but the king's gaze was steady, and Lyra's eyes widened, showing her shock and disbelief. "You mean what exactly?" Ethan asked cautiously. The king's reply was firm. "They will go with you. Not as slaves, not as servants, but as a sign of my gratitude. You have earned my trust, and I believe they are safest with you." Lyra's mouth opened, then closed. She stared at Ethan, her feelings a confusing mix of anger, curiosity, and something she hadn't felt before. Her child clung to her, unaware of the weight of the moment. "You can't just give people to humans," she finally spat, her voice trembling with disbelief. "I am not property." "I do not see them as property," Therian said. "I see them as protected. You have proven yourself worthy, human. Protecting my daughter and my grandchild will be your duty and honor." Ethan's mind raced. He had never imagined such responsibility. He had saved kings before, but never been entrusted with a life, let alone two, and yet something in him stirred. A desire to rise to the challenge, to do what was right, no matter how strange or difficult it seemed. Lyra, despite herself, found her anger giving way to cautious curiosity. She watched Ethan closely, noticing the calm in his eyes, the strength in his hands, the quiet confidence that had saved her father's life. And though she would never say it aloud, she felt relief, strange relief, that this human would be taking care of her and Kale. In the days that followed, Ethan, Lyra, and Kale began preparations for their journey. The court whispered about the unusual arrangement. Advisors questioned the king's judgment, but Therian remained firm. He knew that humans were unpredictable, yes, but also brave, resourceful, and guided by principles that were rare in the galaxy. And in his heart, he trusted Ethan completely. Lyra struggled to accept the situation. She had spent her life resisting her father's control, questioning court rules and mocking expectations of beauty and behavior. Now, she was being handed to a human, someone entirely outside her world. She felt fear, indignation, and a strange flicker of excitement. Kyle, meanwhile, was fascinated by Ethan. The human moved differently than anyone else he had seen, spoke differently, and carried an aura of confidence and safety. The boy clung to Ethan whenever he could, sensing instinctively that this man was someone to trust. Ethan, for his part, treated them both with care and respect. He did not see Lyra's scars or her rebellious attitude as flaws. He saw a person who needed protection, guidance, and perhaps friendship. And Kale, small, wide-eyed, innocent, was already capturing Ethan's heart without effort. The journey ahead would not be easy. Many across the galaxy would not understand the king's decision. Enemies lurked in the shadows, seeking to exploit weakness, and the vast space between worlds was filled with dangers that could destroy them in a heartbeat. But for the first time, Ethan felt that he had a purpose beyond mere survival. He had a family to protect, and he would not fail them. As they prepared to leave the palace, Lyra looked at Ethan once more. Her eyes softened slightly, though she would never admit it aloud. Kale waved at the vast stars beyond the palace windows, unaware of the responsibilities that lay ahead. And Ethan, standing between them, felt the weight of the king's trust, but also the thrill of the unknown. They would travel together into the stars, facing challenges that would test courage, loyalty, and the strength of the human spirit. And in doing so, they would discover something that no one had expected, that humanity, with all its flaws and resilience, could shine brighter than any alien power or courtly expectation. For Ethan, the journey had begun, not just as a medic, but as a protector, a guide, and perhaps in time something even more. And for Lyra and Kale, the future was uncertain, but for the first time it was a future they did not have to face alone. The stars awaited them, endless and indifferent, yet full of possibility. And as they stepped into the shuttle, leaving the palace behind, each of them carried hope, courage, and the unspoken promise that together they could survive anything. The stars stretched endlessly before them, cold and indifferent, yet full of promise. Ethan piloted the shuttle with careful precision, his hands steady despite the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. Lyra sat across from him, arms folded, eyes sharp as ever, watching every move he made. Kale, in contrast, leaned against Ethan's side, staring wide-eyed at the flickering lights of the instruments, clearly trusting the human more than anyone else he had ever known. The first few hours were quiet, tense with the unspoken questions hovering between them. Lyra's voice broke the silence, sharp and cautious. Do humans always act like this? Always fearless, she asked, tilting her head, studying him closely. Ethan glanced at her, offering a small, calm smile. Not always. But sometimes courage is more about doing the right thing even when you're afraid. Lyra's eyebrows lifted, and for a moment she looked thoughtful instead of defiant. Cale let out a small laugh, tugging at her sleeve. I like him, Mom, he said simply, his honesty unfiltered. Lyra glanced at her child, then back at Ethan. She wanted to argue, to push against the idea that this human could ever truly belong in her world. But she found herself hesitating. There was something different about him, something that made her want to trust him, even as her mind screamed caution. Days passed as they traveled toward the human colony on Vesta Prime, a distant world known for its medical research facilities and strong defenses. Ethan kept the shuttle running smoothly, making sure Cale stayed healthy and well-fed. He shared what he could of human food, letting Cale taste strange fruits and nuts that delighted the boy. Lyra watched quietly, her skepticism softening bit by bit as she saw how natural and gentle Ethan was with her child. Their journey, however, was not without danger. A fleet of alien raiders intercepted them in the outskirts of uncharted space. Their ships were sleek, deadly, and merciless. Ethan quickly assessed the situation, realizing they were outgunned. Lyra stood abruptly, her eyes flashing fire. I can fight them, she said, reaching for her blaster. Ethan placed a hand gently on her arm. You won't have to fight alone. But we need a plan first. Using a combination of human tactics and alien technology, Ethan maneuvered the shuttle through asteroid fields, using the environment as cover. Lyra, though hesitant, followed his lead, firing at attackers only when necessary. Cale clutched Ethan's arm, his small body trembling, but his trust in Ethan never wavered. By the end of the battle, the raiders were forced to retreat. The shuttle was scratched and dented but intact. Lyra looked at Ethan, breathing heavily. You're amazing, she admitted reluctantly. Her usual sarcasm softened. Ethan shrugged. I just do what needs to be done. His calm confidence left a mark on her, and for the first time Lyra felt the stirrings of respect and even admiration. Cale, however, ran around the cockpit laughing, delighted by the excitement, already thinking of Ethan as a hero. As they neared Vesta Prime, new challenges awaited. The colony world was bustling, filled with humans and allied aliens, but news of a princess traveling with a human drew attention. Many questioned why the alien king had entrusted her to a mere medic. Some envied Ethan, while others doubted his ability to protect Lyra and Cale. Ethan did not flinch. He understood that humans often had to earn trust in the eyes of strangers, and he was ready to prove himself. He guided Lyra through the city, explaining human customs, teaching her simple interactions, and showing her the medical facilities where Cale could receive care if needed. Lyra struggled to adjust, her pride clashing with the necessity of following Ethan's instructions. Cale, meanwhile, adapted quickly, his innocence bridging the gap between alien and human worlds. He laughed at human games, shared stories about his home planet, and slowly won the hearts of those they met. Lyra couldn't help but notice the contrast. Her child already trusted Ethan completely, while she remained guarded. One evening, as the three sat on the balcony of a small safe house overlooking the city, Lyra spoke quietly, almost to herself. I don't understand humans. How can one person be so calm, so fearless? Ethan looked at her, his gaze steady. It's not that we're fearless. It's that we choose what we fear and then act anyway. Sometimes that's all courage really is. Lyra turned her eyes to Cale, sleeping peacefully in a small bed nearby. She thought of the king, of her duty, and of the risks they had already faced. Slowly, a strange feeling emerged. A willingness to trust this human, to follow him even when the path seemed uncertain. Their time on Vesta Prime, however, was short-lived. A faction of alien mercenaries sent by rivals of the king tracked them down. Their goal was clear: capture the princess and use Cale as leverage to destabilize Tharion's rule. Ethan's instincts kicked in immediately. He planned a strategy that combined human ingenuity and alien technology from the shuttle's systems. Lyra wanted to fight, but Ethan insisted she stay with Cale. You protect him. I'll handle the rest, he said firmly. She hesitated but obeyed, realizing that she had never seen a human work with such calm, focused precision under pressure. The battle was intense. Ethan lured the mercenaries into a narrow canyon, using the terrain to his advantage. He disabled their weapons with precise strikes, set traps using energy fields, and led the attackers into confusion. Lyra watched from above, stunned at his intelligence and bravery. She realized that human courage was not just about fighting, it was about thinking, planning, and staying calm when others panicked. In the end, the mercenaries were defeated, their ships destroyed, and their forces scattered. Lyra ran down to Ethan, breathless and filled with relief. You saved us," she said, her voice soft, almost reverent. Cale ran into Ethan's arms, laughing, and Ethan held them both carefully, feeling a warmth he had not expected. That night, as they sat around a small fire, Lyra spoke more openly. "I never thought humans could be like you, brave, smart, kind, all at the same time." Ethan smiled, quiet and unassuming. "Humans have many flaws," he said, "but we also have something that carries us through. The desire to protect those we care about, no matter the cost." Lyra looked at Cale, then back at Ethan. Something inside her shifted. She realized that beauty, status, and rebellion were meaningless in the face of loyalty and courage. Ethan had proven himself not just as a medic, but as a protector, a guide, and maybe in time a friend worthy of trust. The days turned into weeks. Ethan, Lyra, and Cale traveled together, visiting colonies, learning from allies, and evading enemies. Along the way, Lyra's respect for Ethan grew into something deeper, though she did not yet name it. She found herself laughing at his jokes, listening to his advice, and slowly letting go of her constant need to challenge him. Cale thrived, healthy and happy, his laughter filling the shuttle and echoing across planets. Finally, they returned to Tharion's palace, greeted with cautious admiration. The king observed them closely. "You have done well," he said to Ethan, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. "Not only have you protected my daughter and grandchild, but you have proven that humans possess strength and wisdom beyond what we imagined." Lyra stepped forward, her usual sarcasm replaced by something more sincere. "Thank you," she said quietly, and for the first time Ethan saw her without the armor of rebellion. Cale ran to Tharion, his small hand gripping the king's, and Tharion smiled, knowing his trust had been well placed. Ethan felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known. He had gone to save a life, and in doing so had gained something unexpected, a family, trust, and a purpose greater than himself. He realized that humanity's true power was not in weapons or technology, but in courage, compassion, and the bonds that could cross even the widest gaps between worlds. As the sun rose over the alien palace, Ethan, Lyra, and Cale stood together, facing the vast galaxy beyond. Their journey had been perilous, full of danger and uncertainty, but they had survived, and they had done it not as a medic and a princess, but as a family united by trust, courage, and the unshakable strength of the human spirit. For Lyra, the lessons were clear. Appearances did not matter. Rebellion could be tempered by wisdom, and trust could bridge even the greatest divides. For Cale, the world was full of wonder and safety in the arms of someone who loved him without question. And for Ethan, humanity had proven once again that courage, intelligence, and heart could triumph against impossible odds, even in the cold expanse of the stars. Their story, just beginning, promised more challenges, more discoveries, and more moments that would test the limits of courage and love. But one thing was certain: together they could face anything, and humanity in all its simplicity and brilliance would always shine brighter than any galaxy, weapon, or alien law.